judge for the Queen's Supreme Court, and I am summoning all my jurors back to court in Dallas. June 17th. You girls better get ready, because, honey, I am bringing the seat back to your city. That's right. Miss Sophia and Lonnie B are joining me to come down there and try those cases in Dallas, Texas. Now listen, get over there right now and get those tickets at www.eventbrite.com. You heard me? www.eventbrite.com and get your tickets now. I done told y'all this before. Don't meet me there, bitch. Beat me there. See you soon, Dallas. I love you.
SayItInACard.com is an online greeting card company that delivers right to your front door. Visit our website, www.SayItInACard.com. You can read the cards, order the cards, and we ship them directly to you. If you feel it, we say it in a card. We have breakup cards, troubled relationship cards, troubled friendship cards, and of course, all of the traditional cards as well, from birthday to Mother's Day. So again, visit us at www.SayItInACard.com. Free shipping for a limited time. This is a very important conversation. Someone reached out to me via social media and asked if I would ever consider doing a conversation about the timeliness and the appropriateness of introducing your children to the men you're dating. So this came from the perspective of a woman, but I know that this issue is critical from a male perspective and for a female perspective, because our boys' safety is just as important as the safety of our girls. So I had the conversation with a friend of mine from college. I haven't seen her in many, many years. We've talked throughout the years through social media and over the phone. She supported my books, and her mom, in turn, has supported me. So I have a lot of followers down in Houston, Texas, as a result of my friendship with her. And so she wanted to share her story of how she met her husband and how she decided when to introduce her daughter. But the conversation also moves into blending families. Take a listen. This is very personal work for me.
Politics.
I believe I was called to tell my story, use my voice, be a voice for the community, to speak to and for a community of people that's been ignored, denied,
love,
overlooked.
relationships, religion.
This is my life's work.
Religion.
I want to use words to uplift, heal, inspire, encourage.
Do something different. Every Monday at 10.
Good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressives, and dreamers. I'm Craig the Writer Stewart, and this is So Much to Say. These are my thoughts in my voice on black shit, white shit, gay shit, and everything in between. So today I have my friend Leah here, and we're talking about when it's the appropriate time to introduce your children to someone you're dating. Now, I know you recently got married. Mm-hmm. But how long were you dating this guy, dating your husband, before you got engaged? But more specifically, before you introduced him to your daughter? Because you have a girl. And I think that sometimes it's really important for mothers. It's important for mothers to pay attention, period, to your children and when you're introducing them to someone that you're dating. But I would venture to say, especially with girls.
Right.
So were there certain precautions that you took?
Definitely. And it was a scary road for me, because when I met my husband, I had heard people say before, at some point you sort of know that's the person, that's going to be your person. Mm-hmm. So then I was grappling with, is that going to be okay with my daughter, who had not had another man be in the house with her other than her father, who's still very involved in her life.
Okay.
And so we had been dating probably about 4 to 5 months before we started to feel like, okay, this is going to be something real. Mm-hmm. We know we want to be together. And so he has a daughter too, which also sort of eased things. But she's younger than my daughter.
And how old was your daughter? How old was your daughter when you met him?
15. And
So she
she's
was
17
15.
now.
Okay. And so no other man has lived in your home other than her father.
Right.
Now, has she met any of the guys that you had dated before?
One.
And how
And
long?
her father and I.
Go ahead.
We broke up when she was 3.
Okay, her father and you.
Yes.
And so she was how old when you introduced the very first guy to her?
When I introduced her to the first guy, she was 6 or 7, and we were together for 4 years, and we were 2 years in when I introduced her.
So she didn't meet him until 2 years later.
Right.
Okay. Now, was that for any particular reason? Because, I mean, I'm sure people listening are like, well, wow, that's a really long time.
It is, and I tell you, this gets kind of personal for me, and but it's my truth, and so I have to tell it. But one of the reasons I was so precautious is because my parents divorced when I was young, and my mother dated, and I didn't meet a lot of the men that she dated. I recall maybe 3, 2 of which who had great roles in my life, and but one, the first one that I ever met, he molested me. And so when I was 10 or 11,
And
he came.
Go ahead.
He came into my room one night, claiming to want to kiss me goodnight. He tried to do that by sticking his tongue in my mouth, and he also put his hands on my body. And I very frankly, at that age, told him to stop, take his hands off of me, and get out of my room. But I never told my mother.
So even to this day, does she not know?
She knows now.
She knows now.
But I was probably 40 by the time I told her.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was her reaction?
Oh, she cried. She cried. It was like it just happened for her.
So was this something was that an isolated thing? Did it only happen at one time with this guy?
Yes.
And for
yes,
how
he
long?
didn't fool with me again.
Right. And how long after that, or how long did they date after that? Did they continue to date for a while? So did you have to see him?
They did. I had to see him, but I feel like it may have been shorter than a year before they broke up.
And why do you think you never told your mom?
Because I think I knew it was wrong of him. And I knew it wasn't anything that she was doing. So I had always been clear about that. But
so you didn't personalize it like a lot of times.
Happy with him.
She seemed to be really happy.
Yeah, and I didn't want to mess that up for her, and I didn't want to. I don't know. I felt it would be hurtful to her.
And so when you were 40 and you told her, did you tell her that was why you didn't tell her?
I didn't.
Okay. So what was that conversation? You called her. What provoked you to call her when you told her? Or were you in the same room with her when you told her?
We were in the same room. We were sitting in the car, as a matter of fact, and we were just kind of talking about relationships and such. And she was saying how, because at the time, I wasn't married, I wasn't seeing anyone, and she was just like, I wasn't seeing anyone seriously. I just don't count it if I'm just dating.
Right.
And so she said, I really wanted more, for you, if that's what you wanted, but I feel like it's really brave of you to not want to bring someone in the house with Cheney, and so, and I said, well, I want to shed a little light for you on why I made some of the decisions that I made. And so she was, got really interested. Oh, okay. And so I said, there were some relationships that you had that sort of made me fearful of what it could mean to bring another man in the house with a daughter. And so she was like, go on, And then I sort of told her. And so she was like, and he's deceased.
I was going to ask that.
It's a good thing he was, because she probably would have sought him out and tried to somehow make that, right, or avenge me all these years later, and it wouldn't have even been worth it. But
so she cried, and what did she say? Do you remember what she said?
she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "I just didn't know what to do, but I put a stop to it the first time it happened, and it didn't happen anymore." And that was going to be her next question, was how did it happen? How often? How many times? And what did he do when you told him to stop? And I said, well, he stopped, and he didn't approach me again. And so she's like, typical black mom said, MF, And so then she had her angry reaction after her hurt reaction, and then she went back to being hurt again, and she was like, I am so sorry that you had to deal with that, and there was no one there to comfort you for all of those things. So,
and I noticed you said there's a reason why I've taken the steps with my daughter, because of some of the relationships that you had. So were there a couple situations with men that your mom dated that made you uncomfortable?
Yeah, so there was another guy who was aggressive, and he was moving into the abusive area.
Yeah. So was this before or after that first one?
After.
Okay.
I was a little older.
Okay.
So my mom, she saw that.
Okay.
And she decided to go ahead and break up with him. And we were at our house when she broke up with him, and I was asleep, and I heard some arguing ensue. 5 minutes after that, my mom was waking me up. She said, put your robe and slippers on. We're leaving. I did that.
And this was your house, right?
Our house. Our house. We got into the car. He comes running out of the house, and he says, get out of the car. We're not finished yet. And my mom says, no, we're leaving. She starts the car. He goes to get a brick out of the front yard, and he breaks the car window.
So was this the driver's side window, the
Yes.
windshield? Okay.
It's a driver's side window that my mom was sitting on.
Okay.
And she said, you need to leave now, or I will call the police.
And what happened?
He gave up.
And he left.
And he left.
So you said it started to become violent. Was it a thing where where it looked like he was, you say he became aggressive, that was your word. Was it that he became aggressive with you or your mom or both?
Just her. He didn't interact a lot with me. He was more focused, I guess, on telling her what to tell me to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So he was trying to rear you, but through her.
Yeah.
So do you remember, how soon after your mom met these men did you meet them, or she introduced you to them?
I wasn't always sure how long she had been dating them, but by the time I met them, they were very familiar.
Right.
So they were not still getting to know each other per se.
She had known them for some time, right? Because what would you say to parents, especially mothers in particular, that will choose the man over their child? And in this case, I want to specifically talk about girls. And I know that it happens with boys, because I was just watching the Red Table Talk the other day, and there's a basketball player that was just on there. Forgive me, I cannot remember his name, but he was talking about how he had been molested by one of his brother's friends. Like, they used to go to the friend's house and play video games.
Wow.
Yeah, they would play video games, and he said he was orally molested. And I hate that I can't remember his name. I'm going to try to look it up while we're talking. But he suppressed it. And for years, he suppressed it. And then years later, he was an adult. He was playing on the NBA. And he went to use a restroom, a public restroom. And a man came into the restroom drunk. And Keon Dooling, that's his name.
Okay.
And a man came into the restroom drunk and patted him on his butt, hit him on his butt while he was at the urinal, and he went off, like he beat the man up. So that triggered him. It triggered him. It was something, because I just believe that when you suppress a thing, whether it's your sexuality, whether it's a trauma, it has to explode. It has to be released at some point. And so this was the trigger, and He ended up quote unquote snapping or having a nervous breakdown. He ended up being institutionalized. It was a really great episode, but
wow,
It was just this past Monday. But the point is, there are often times when, so I don't want to mitigate the fact that it does happen to boys, because I know that it does. But since
Right.
you have a girl, and we often hear the story of women who will choose a man over their child's word. Like oftentimes children will come to the mom and say, listen, this is what happened. And then the mom, because she has settled into this relationship, or because she's getting help from the man, or because she's in love, or she just doesn't want to believe it, she's in denial, will often ignore a child's cry. So what would you say to a mother that may have a child that's come to them and said, listen, this is what's happening?
I would say there's some work that needs to be done prior to that. Mm-hmm. And so for me, because I was aware of my circumstances, mm-hmm. I knew that was something I would never do. And so I took great care to rear my daughter in a fashion that there was a culture of trust between us, mm-hmm. and that she knew I was going to be on her side.
No matter what. Yeah.
No matter what. Mm-hmm. And even if she was wrong in the moment, and I would correct that later. Uh-huh.
So what did that conversation look like, though? What did you say to her, and how old was she?
So this was several conversations, and they make for some good laughs. Uh-huh. I remember one when she was 3, and she was in the bathtub, and she said to me, Mom, she said, my vagina hurts. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, okay. Has anyone been touching it? Mm-hmm. And she was like, yes. And
did you get alarmed right away?
I got alarmed. I got lightheaded, the whole nine, but I readied myself. Uh-huh. Because the only man she had met at that point was her own father.
It was her dad. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I said, okay, who? And she said, me. And I said, oh.
Right.
Okay. So we started to have conversations about her body being her own, mm-hmm. and that her body was, she had full domain over her own body.
And control, yeah.
Even from me.
Yeah.
And from the people closest to her. And that people had to have her permission to make contact, to make physical contact with her. Mm-hmm. And
so it was a series of conversations over the years.
It was a series of conversations over her life. And even as she got older and started to interact with boys and things like that, and I would say, we're from Texas, and there were some southern sort of, installations of how you carry yourself as a young woman, and and these things are just passed down from generation to generation, and so I've had a lot of conversations about that, and how to be respectful and how to be respected, and so, and then that kind of rolled into just being, taking care of your body, being mindful of who you allow into your personal space, and then how you absorb energy around you. And whether that could be positive, that could be negative, it could be, and how you can have control over the energy that's around you that you're going to absorb.
So does she know the story? Your story?
No.
She doesn't. No. Do you think you'll ever tell her?
I will.
Because I was thinking that maybe at some point where she got, because you said she's 17 now. Mm-hmm. I just figured that at some point by the time she got to maybe 15 or so, or 13, or maybe even when you started introducing her to your now husband, I just thought maybe you had said to her, well, listen, let me just share this with you. You know what I'm saying? When she can handle a story like that.
So what I did say to her, and I had to ready myself for that because by then I knew he was the one, but before I could sort of settle into that feeling, I had to feel like I was clear with her. Mm-hmm. And so we had a conversation one day. I sat her down. I said, hey, Mommy and, Sean, we've been dating for a while now.
And she was how old at this point?
16.
16, okay.
So, we're thinking about getting married. And want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And she was like, oh, Mom, you're so happy, and Mr. Sean's nice, and I love y'all together, and I said, okay, so I'm happy that I'm happy too, but I need to know how you feel about it. And so, do you like him? She was like, oh yeah, I think he's very nice. And I said, has he ever said or done anything at all to make you feel uncomfortable, even in the least way? And she was like, oh no. And I said, okay. I said, what are your interactions like, with him? And so she's like, oh, he's funny. Sometimes he's kind of corny, but he's funny, And so I said, okay. I said, do you feel like you would still be kept safe if we all lived in the same house together? And she said, absolutely.
Now, how long after that conversation did he move in?
Well, we moved in.
Oh, you moved in into his house. Okay. How long after that?
We moved in.
Okay.
Probably, I think that conversation took place in the late fall. Okay. And then maybe the following February.
Okay. So a few months.
So it started off, we started spending every other weekend together with both our girls. So, and the way we introduced his girl, his daughter to me, was his parents were coming to town. And I said, well, because he kept saying he wanted me to meet Joy. And I said, well, why don't we wait until your parents come to town, and then she can be flanked by all the people that keep her safe when she's introduced to me. Yeah. And he thought that was a great idea. That's how it went down. And it's been the same ever since. Right. So
this is interesting. So what if she had said to you, what if your daughter had said to you, well, I don't really like him. Not that he ever said or did anything out of the way, but what if she said, I'm not really feeling that? What would your response have been? Like, what would you have done?
Probably at that point to seek some counseling to try to get more of the truth out. So for all three of us, to try to see if there was some underlying dynamic that was playing into that.
Right. Perhaps she just didn't want to share you or something. You know what I mean?
And then, it was scary for me because I realize now that one of the reasons I dated so few men very seriously while she was sort of, being raised into this young woman that she is now is because my past situation, like knowing why I didn't tell my mother and knowing what I experienced as a girl myself, I felt like, okay, I'm not going to love a man so much that my daughter sees me so happy and feels like she can't come to me and interrupt that if it needs to be interrupted. Right. And so I have always been somewhat of a hard shell to crack. And then Sean came in with a very different approach and just slowly started peeling back those layers. And before I knew it, I was in love with him. And so irrevocably in love with him. So, if I had to leave him on her behalf, I would. Right. But I would still have loved him. Right.
So how long were you dating before you got engaged?
We dated for about a year. Okay. So about a year, and we literally got engaged and married within 2 months' time. Okay. Because we were planning on having a bigger type of ceremony than we did. And once all the nuts and bolts started moving, and I don't know what it is about weddings that get people so crazy, but it was starting to be too much. And so I said, are we waiting on anything, specific? He's like, I'm just waiting on you. And I said, all right, well, let's do it. He said, let's do it. And I said, when did you have in mind? He's like, end of the month. And so that was November for us.
And what would you say is too soon for a parent to introduce their child to someone they're dating? Because now we see article after article, and I mean, of course, this has been going on since the beginning of time, but now with the advent of social media, it's easy to see a story in Dakota, South Dakota, or wherever. So, and you hear all of these stories of, like I just read one, I believe, last week, which I think kind of provoked us to have this conversation, where a father killed a little girl because he was being vindictive towards the mom. I think the mom had left him or something like that, and so he ended up killing the little girl. So, like, what is too soon, would you say?
I think those situations are so hard because if I remember that story, she also had another baby with that man.
Mm-hmm. But I think the one that he killed was by someone else.
Someone else,
yeah.
Right. So, you never really know someone. You can know someone for years and years and never really know them. And so I'm consciously aware of that every day. And every day, like, I know I'm trying to learn about my husband and he's trying to learn about me. And because we met late in life, so there are past experiences that shaped who we are today. And so for me, it was more or less about just sort of having a basic understanding of their schema. I was constantly listening for red flags. Like, did he ever say anything to me that was kind of off-keel? That would make me, the hairs on the back of my neck raise up. And when I didn't see any of those things, and we started wanting to spend more time with one another, even when we had our children in our care, that's when I said, okay, let's see if we can do an introduction. Because
then how did you even, because my thing is with people that are dating, and again, I'm specifically talking about with women, because oftentimes women are the care providers. Oftentimes the kids live with the mom. So how do you navigate dating? Like, how do you graduate to the point where, okay, you've met this man, you like him, you still haven't introduced him to your children or child yet, but how do you get to the point where you spend the night, or you let him spend the night? You know what I'm saying? Of course, obviously, I would suggest or expect that your child wouldn't be at home if he's staying at your house. But how did you ever have a sleepover at his house? Would she have to be, with her dad or maybe with your mom or?
Yeah, so I was blessed. My daughter's dad is still very much involved. So every other weekend, she's with her dad.
Okay.
And so the first thing he did was he has his daughter every other weekend too. So the first thing he did was get our weekends aligned.
Okay, so that
we could spend time together without the kids.
Right. So the weekend that Cheney was gone with her dad or whomever, his daughter was gone as well. Right. Okay, so you could spend the night at whomever's house at that point. And
that's what we did.
Right.
That's what we did. And then for me, she's also at her dad's one day a week. And now that she's a little older, she kind of just does what she wants to do. She because her dad lives closer to her high school than we do, and she's got friends that are in the near vicinity. And so if they have some plans to do something, and she knows I'm not going to want to cart her across town, she'll say I'm going to stay at Dad's tonight. And so she goes back and forth. But I mean, now it's over. We're married, so I don't have to really try to negotiate time issues, but that was easy for me. But I will tell you that I have friends who have children whose fathers aren't involved. Yeah. And they have had to become very creative. And in terms of being able to spend time with people and before introducing them. But then I have a couple of friends too who say, I believe in introducing them right away, so I can see the dynamics from the very beginning. For me, I don't feel like that was the right way for me, because I'm trying to make sure I have the dynamics.
Right.
Yeah, and then I can decide for my minor child if I think those are dynamics that I want to bring into her life again, because I was having those conversations about her absorbing the energy around her.
Yeah, and my thing is, I just feel that everyone that you're dating or quote-unquote interviewing doesn't need to meet your children. It's just like when I first started dating guys, I didn't always tell my mom about every guy that I was dating, because see, I didn't need her thinking that I was having sex with all these people, because one time she said the wrong thing to me, and it really solidified things for me. And I'll never forget, I just started dating this guy, and she happened to call me and I was dropping him off at home. But on the way to dropping him off, we had stopped at a fast food place, and we were at the drive-thru window. And she called me, and I picked up, and I was talking to her, and it was about 10:30 at night. I'll never forget, it was about 10:30 at night. And I said, Ma, hold on one second. So I said to him, I said, what did you want to order? And so I could tell she was adjusting herself. Like, if she was in the bed, but I could hear her moving. I could hear through the front phone that she was adjusting herself, like trying to hear or like situate herself. And she was like, who is that? I said, it's a friend of mine. And so he went on to place his order through the drive-through mic, and so we pulled around. And so she says, what kind of friend? And I said, a friend. And so then she said to me, and I will never forget, I don't even know if I've ever told this story before, but I'll never forget, she said to me, you keep on laying up with all these men, your ass gonna end up with AIDS. I will never forget she said that to me.
No.
That for me is solidified for me. It was a seminal moment for me, and it made me realize that I could not tell her every single time, because I had just met the guy. We had never even slept together. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I had probably known him maybe a month. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. Mm-hmm. And that thing stung me, though. And that was the first time that I put my mother on what I call silent lunch. So, like, listen, she called me the next day. I got off the phone, but she called me the next day, and I didn't answer. I let her go right to the voicemail. She called me another time. I left her on silent lunch for about 3 days.
Ooh,
and so my sister called me and was like, Craig, why haven't you talked to mommy? Like, what's going on? And I told her what happened. She said, no, Craig, she said that. So, of course, she, confronted my mom and told her, she said, that was wrong. You shouldn't have said that, da-da-da.
Right.
So, of course, my mother was leaving these little voice messages like, I'm your mother. How you going to not talk to me? Da-da-da. I still let her ass sit on that voicemail, right? So when I finally called her back, I said to her, you owe me an apology. I said, because first of all, what you're not going to do is talk to me sideways like that. I said, because if you're going to have a conversation with me about HIV and AIDS, you need to also have a conversation with the black women in your life. I said, because right now, they are the number one, they're the leading demographic for new HIV infection cases. And I gave her the statistics at the time because I was really, really on top of those numbers at that time. And I said, so don't come to me having that conversation. I said, first of all, you don't know who I've slept with. I hadn't even slept with this boy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, but my mom is one of those people where she, right. When you call her to the carpet, she ain't gonna apologize. And I was just like, you owe me an apology. She said, I said, no, not I said, you owe me an apology. She said, well, I'm sorry. It was just like, well, I'm sorry. It was just like kind of like, I guess I'll give you this apology. But for the same very reason, like, you don't want your children to think that all of these men that you're rotating through this revolving door, that you're sleeping with them. And you may not even be sleeping with them, but it just doesn't look good. It's about the perception of it.
Yeah. Well, and I've always said, too, I don't know what I would have done if I had a boy, but because I have a same-sex child who's going to emulate my behavior, I took some precautions. And I took some heat over that, too, because there were family members. Folks always want to be in your business.
And trying to tell you how to run your life.
And well, why isn't Leah dating anybody? And my mom said to me one time, so my mom used to meet all kinds of folks I dated casually, folks I just knew as friends. And finally one day she said, look, I don't want to meet anybody else unless they're going to be your husband.
All right.
And I said, okay. So I took that to heart.
And you stopped introducing
anybody else. So in her mind, out of sight, out of mind, there was no one. There was dating people. Yeah. So I come home one summer, and she says to me, are you a lesbian? And I said, with the most serious face, why do you ask? And she said, well, because some folks think that because you're not dating and your best friend not dating, that you all are lesbians and y'all are really together.
And just to color the story for the people that are listening, you live in Virginia. You're from Houston, but you live in Virginia, and your mom is still in Houston. So it's easy for them to kind of create this kind of a story, and to not
in their mind.
absolutely, and to not meet a guy that you're dating because you're in two different states. So the only reason, the only way that they would meet them is if you went home on a special trip, or you went home for a holiday, and you're only going to bring someone that's special home for a holiday.
Right.
It's not like you're in the same city. Go ahead.
Right. So, and then my best friend lives in Houston too, so I don't know how they were connecting those dots. And so I just looked at her and I said, "Oh, huh." And so she's just staring at that point because it's eating away at her.
Right.
And I didn't comment further. And she was like, "Well, what do you have to say?" And I said, "Well, those folks can think whatever they like." And I left it right at that.
Really? And you never had another conversation about it?
No.
So let me ask you, did Chaney...
Because it wasn't about my sexuality.
Right. Right.
So why are you even bringing that up? To appease someone's nosiness? No.
Exactly.
I'm not going to entertain it.
So did your daughter's father ever feel like he needed to be involved in, or did he ever have a say in how... whether or not someone you dated was introduced to her?
No, he tried to think that he would at one point, but no.
So he trusted your judgment on it?
Well, he didn't have a choice. And I think as time went by, he started to understand that my judgment was trustworthy. So, and so on the other hand...
I was just going to ask, did you ever have concerns about...
He has met too many women that he's dated, which is also the reason we didn't stay together, because he's not the settle down type of guy.
Yeah.
And I told him one day, I said, you have to stop introducing her to everyone.
How did he take that?
He just was, felt somewhat slighted because it was me telling him. But I'll give you just a glimpse of, where we stand as co-parents. I'm listed as his emergency contact.
You're listed as his emergency contact.
Yeah, he's like family. He's like my brother. We're not together, but we're still a family unit because we co-parent our daughter. But he's also not a truthful person in relationships. And so the picture that his girlfriends would have of me was very different than the reality. And so...
because the story would always be slanted to make you look like the bad guy.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And there were a couple who were, open-minded enough to reach out to me directly. And then, one sort of happened organically because her son was in Little League football when my daughter was in Little League cheerleading. And we would see each other out at the practices. And we started talking. And one day she said to me, "You are nothing like he has described you." And I was just like, well, that's not surprising. But, it's always good to get your own information.
Right. So
we developed a relationship from there. And interestingly enough, I still know her. She's moved on. She's married. Of course, she's not with him anymore because he's not the settle down type. And then, there was another one who he was with for a long time. Has been nothing but kind to my daughter, which is the only thing I would ask. It's just that you show kindness to my daughter. And she, out of the kindness of her heart, wanted to do some nice things for her and reached out to me to see if it would be okay. And then also was like, okay, you're nothing like what he said you were like. And then that evolved organically. And so we're still friends, and they're not even together anymore.
Right.
But I never get involved in their relationship, at all. And I've even told her before, if her dad, gives you permission, that's okay. It doesn't have to come from me.
So where was the first time your husband met her father?
Interestingly, it was when we were all there one weekend, and her dad had to drop her back off. And it was the first time I gave him the new address to drop her off.
So you and Cheney had moved in with your current husband?
Well, we hadn't fully moved in, but that's where we were going to be.
Okay.
And so he came over to drop her off, and Sean was outside working in the yard. And
Now, how long were you and Sean together at this point?
we had probably been together for probably about 6 months.
Okay.
And so they had seen each other before because Sean came to me with me to a couple of Cheney's events, like a basketball game, chorus concert, things like that. And so he had seen her dad, and her dad had seen him. But her dad, he has a slightly arrogant side to him. He was busy being standoffish, and like normally when we're at events, he'll come and sit near me.
But because Sean was there.
He didn't do that no. And so that day he dropped her off. It was funny because I was looking out the window and I saw Sean walking over to the car after Rob got out to help Cheney get her stuff out. And he startled him because he walked over there.
So Sean startled her father?
Yes.
Okay.
And when he turned around, he said, "How you doing? I'm Sean." And he extended his hand, and her dad took it, and they shook hands.
Okay.
And it's been fine ever since.
And Sean just walked over to help Cheney get her stuff out of the car?
Well, her dad was helping her get her stuff out of the car. He walked over
to say hello. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you and Sean were together and you were dating, was there a defining moment where you actually realized, okay, I'm comfortable leaving her at home with him?
Yes. But it came after my stepdaughter was left in my care a couple of times. And so it was kind of like an exchange.
Right.
And then I had a little talk with her first because it was the first time it was ever going to happen.
And where were you going?
About 16.
Were you just going for the day, or were you?
Well, not the whole day.
Okay.
Maybe a few hours.
Okay.
Maybe out with some friends, or to get a nail appointment or a hair appointment or something like that.
Right.
And I said, "Hey, I'm gonna go and do such and such. Sean is home. Are you okay with that?" And she's like, "Oh, yes." And I'm like, "Okay." So I come back and it's like, "How'd everything go?" And he's like, "Oh, I mean, she didn't really come out of her room. We didn't have a chance to interact much."
Right.
And so I went back and like, "Hey, you didn't come out of your room much. I'm back." And she's like, No, I was doing stuff in here and I had to fold up some clothes and da-da-da. And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's not because you were uncomfortable." And she's like, No, I went downstairs and got some coffee, but I had
What's she doing drinking coffee?
I've created a monster. It's my own fault because I was 36 when I started drinking coffee, but she is full-fledged a coffee drinker.
Right.
Okay? Can make it and everything. Makes a good pie.
So listen, was there ever a point where, before you moved in, before you and Cheney moved in to the house with Sean, were there ever periods where Sean would come over to your place and you would say to her, "Sean is coming over, I need you to put some clothes on"? Or did you have a specific conversation with her when you guys moved in? Okay, now listen, Cheney, I know when we were living, it was just me and you could walk around in your bra or your whatever it is that she might walk around in. Were there ever conversations that you had with her where you said, "Listen, you can't dress like that"? Or did she just automatically know? Or did you just make sure you had the conversation?
She automatically knew, and she she wears like pajama shorts and t-shirts and stuff like that, so she's pretty appropriate. The only thing I did tell her was close the door when you go to the bathroom.
Right.
And so
because when it was just the two of you.
Yeah. And so she but yes, he did come over, but never for more than a night. And he would always leave early. So that's another conversation. So when he would spend the night, even after you had integrated them and all of that, did you feel funny, like having him spend the night the first time and she knew he was there? Or did you, because were there times initially where you would try to have him come over while she was already sleeping or something, and then you have him sneak out in the morning? No, you never. No.
Okay.
Never snuck him in.
Okay.
Never snuck him in or out. But just wanted to make sure that when we were still maintaining separate households, that her space still felt like her space. Because I know as a woman, my home is my sanctuary. And I didn't invite everyone I dated to my home. I dated people who never ever saw my house, never knew my address. Because I just didn't give it, the address is almost like meeting the child. It's going to be a while before you get that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want any kind of drama. I don't want anybody popping up or anything like that. And so so I was just trying to maintain the sanctuary. And so make sure she always felt like her space had not been violated, because I had company.
Right.
And so he was never like all about the house with shoes off and feet on the table. And so it was never that kind of experience. Sometimes he would come over, like if he came over on a Saturday evening or a Sunday evening, we might watch a show together that we all had in common. And then he would sort of retire to my room, and then I would say my goodnights to her. She would go into her room, and then I would go, to my room.
So did you have a specific conversation with her the first time he was going to spend the night?
I just told her, I said, Mr. Sean is going to come over tonight, and he's probably going to stay over. So she's like, oh.
He's probably going to stay over.
Oh, okay. Yeah. She's like, oh, okay.
Did she did she laugh, or did she smile, or she didn't? She just said, oh.
She did. And here's what's really interesting, right? As, my same-sex daughter, she pays very close attention to our relationship and to our marriage.
Because you're a demonstration.
Yes.
And I try to say this all the time.
She's fully aware of all the dynamics.
Yeah.
She knows when, she's recognized everything, because one day she told me of her own volition. She said, one of the things I love about y'all is y'all act like best friends.
And she's going to model, you're modeling that for her. So that's what she's going to try to recreate when she goes, like whatever relationship examples that you have in front of your children, that's what they're going to try to replicate.
Right.
So if it's an abusive relationship, that's what they're going to replicate.
Right. And what I love about him is he's really shown her, he's been a great example of what a man should look like in a marriage.
Right.
And so she's able to see that in the house. I'm sad that it wasn't with her own dad.
Yeah.
But at least it's not something that's lost upon her now because her own dad didn't do it.
Yeah.
She's still seeing something.
The possibility
of it. Example of that.
Yeah. So the first night that he spent the night, did you feel? Let's get a little greasy. Did you? Did you feel like awkward having sex or anything like that? Like when he spent the night?
Definitely.
You were worried that she could hear? It was a lot of what?
Shushing. Right, it was a lot of wait.
Wait.
Listening.
Wait. Oh, she going to the bathroom right now. Shh.
Right, it was all of that was going on. And then, I was just like, I have to relax,
Right. But eventually you got comfortable with it. And
I did.
But no, I think this is great. And I hope that somebody listening to this, someone with children, maybe they will reconsider how they do things now. Maybe if they're not even using all of these safeguards or precautions, maybe they will reconsider how they do things. And even those parents that are listening who may have a child that's come to them and said, listen, he made me feel uncomfortable, he said this to me, or he touched me, or maybe something will kind of urge them to pay closer attention now because of this conversation. So I appreciate you being so open. I've known you since college, and I had no idea that had happened,
Yeah, and I would just say look for the red flags. And the other good thing that worked for my husband's towards him was the dog liked him.
Oh, okay.
And, animals and children, if they don't like somebody, it's usually something wrong.
Pay attention to that energy.
Yeah.
Pay attention to that energy.
Yeah. But I appreciate you letting me share my story and tell my truth. And,
you're welcome.
I know it's different for every mother out there, but all I can say is, talk to your children and pay attention to the red flags, because it will lead to something in adulthood that's not easily corrected. And, for me, it could have cost me love. Because I had closed my heart off to being truly open. And thankfully, my husband was just a very patient man who listened to me very closely. And then
he was listening for your love languages.
Yeah, and then acted upon those. And so it worked out for us. So,
I'm just curious, what's his sign and what's your sign?
he's a Gemini.
And what's your sign?
And I am a Pisces.
Okay.
But now, so his birthday is today.
Oh, really?
And my best friend's birthday was the day before yesterday.
Wow.
So my best friend, who I've been friends with since high school, and my husband have birthdays 2 days apart, and we really connect. And astrologically, Pisces women and Gemini men don't get along that well. But I think it's because we met older in life, and so there's some changing and transitioning that we've kind of learned how to, be
navigate,
more functional in relationships. So yeah.
Quick question: does he know the story that you shared with your mom at 40?
Yes.
He does. Okay. So what was that? How did you come about telling him?
There were some things, like he started to notice that there were times when I would revert back to being more closed. Because like if he said, or did something that was disappointing to me, I would start to sort of harden myself again.
Yeah, it was a defense mechanism coming up.
Yes. And so he asked about it because he was paying attention, and he was like, tell me about that. So I told him.
I just think that it's really interesting, and the thing that I try to convey, especially to women, the women that follow my social media or listen to this podcast, and one of the things that I try to teach myself, is that when a man is truly interested, he's going to do anything and everything to make it known to you. And he's going to put forth the effort. And so if you set the bar, set the bar, he will rise to the occasion. He will rise to it. You don't have to lower your standard. He will rise to the occasion. He will become the man.
You're right. And I honestly didn't, and I told him before, I said, honestly, I didn't think men like you still existed. Yeah. And I just was so shocked. He checks every box. Now, he's not perfect. No man is perfect.
No man is perfect.
But he's perfect for me. And the few little things that he has are things that I can live with.
Yeah. And that's really what it's about.
We don't have any deal breakers between each other.
Exactly.
So,
that's really what it's about. It's about laying all of the cards on the table and seeing or laying all of the attributes and the qualities and the you check off all of the things and see what you can really deal with and what you can't.
Right.
That's where you go. People get stuck in a type. Oh, does he look like this? Does she look like that? But and I know that oftentimes we make poor decisions out of desperation or out of loneliness, and that goes back to the point of parents, men and women alike, who will choose a partner or a spouse over their child. Because I had a similar situation with my dad. And it wasn't a situation where someone violated me or anything like that, but it was a situation where I'm my dad's only child. Now, my mom has 3. But my sister and brother have a different father. They have the same father. My sister and brother share a father. And then I came along once my mom married my dad. So I'm my dad's only child. And he was always telling me how proud he was of me and just always just going out of his way, going above and beyond. And the dynamic changed once he got married. Once he got married to his, they're divorced now. But once he got married, I was going into freshman year at Hampton. I was going into my freshman year. They got married the summer before I came into Hampton. And my father was required to send child support, which he had been doing from the time I was in the 9th grade. So they met, and then as soon as she came into the picture, that's when the dynamic started to change. He started to question why he needed to send child support. And then he started to question whether or not I was actually getting the child support. Now, of course, between 9th and the 12th grade, I didn't even know anything about the child support between 9th and the 12th grade. But about 2 weeks before, about a month or so before I went away to Hampton, my mother said to me, listen, you get this child support check. It comes every month on the 15th. Sometimes it's a little early. Sometimes he's a little late. She said, but I'm going to put this check in your account when it comes. She said, it is your responsibility to make it stretch. And like I told you, sometimes he's early, sometimes he's late. She said, but you better make it work. She said, don't call me for anything. I'm paying that tuition, and I'm going to pay the phone bill. That's it. So that money, I had to live off of that money. So, like, I never had to work at school when I was in school. But there were times where my father felt like maybe I shouldn't have to send this money anymore because he thought my mom was still getting the money. And like I had, like she had when I was in school, when I was in high school. And so he started to question me. Well, how much is she putting in your account? Like he thought that she was still right. He always thought that she was still pinching some of the money off and giving
because
someone was his wife.
Have your best interest.
Absolutely.
At heart.
So his wife started getting in his ear. And she started to question why he still had to send child support. But my mom had the good sense to put it in the divorce decree. Because typically child support ends at 18, but she had put it in the divorce papers that he had to send it until I graduated college.
Post-secondary support for college.
Yes. Yeah. It had to come until I turned 22 or I graduated, whichever came first. And so he started to question things. And it really put a strain on our relationship. And I always felt, and I had this conversation with him when I was in college, I really feel like you have moved our relationship to the back burner and you've moved her to the front. Because it's like you're trying to prove to her that you're all the way into this marriage. I said, but any woman that's willing to allow you to shift your relationship with your child isn't really there for you. I said, what you need to understand, I remember telling him this when I was like 18, because this happened like my freshman year. I said, I will always be your son. She may not always be your wife. And like I just told you at the beginning of this story, they're no longer married. Yeah. And so there became a period where the dynamic that he and I had started to put a strain on our relationship, but then it also put a strain on his marriage. And then he started to realize that she was just really insecure and she was just trying to control other aspects of his life. And what I've learned is love is not control or ownership. Right. Love is freedom with clear boundaries for the relationship, though. And so they subsequently got divorced, but, and I remember him being really lonely at one point because as a result of the way that he handled our relationship while he was married, I kind of became a little distant. Right. And it just was hard for me to kind of get back to that relationship because I just felt like you chose someone over me. I was always here. I was here first. And you chose her over me. And I know that there are children that resent their parents for choosing a spouse or a partner, over them. Right. And you were a good son, though. And so, there are children out there who are manipulative. Yes. And so who don't want or, who have parents who manipulate through them. Mm-hmm. Was she ever welcoming to you? In the beginning, and that was the thing. She and I were so close in the beginning. And, when I would call the house, because eventually she moved into his house, and I would call the house, and she would answer the phone. She was the person who answered the phone once she moved in. And so I would have conversations with her longer than I would talk to my dad. Like, there would be times that I would end up, I would be calling for my dad, but because she answered the phone, I'd end up talking to her. And I said, I would just say, just tell him I called. You know what I mean? Because I would have had the conversation with her about, whatever. And so it just shifted once they got married. So it was almost like she was just playing this role just to kind of get in with me. Right. And then once she got in there, it was just like, I don't really... The real her started to show up. Yeah. And I remember him telling me that she had certain conversations with him about the life insurance. If something was to happen to him, she wouldn't get anything because I'm on everything. And like I said, I'm my father's only child, so I was on the house and I was on his life insurance. And then he ended up changing a lot of that. Like, he ended up putting her on the house. Yes. And so all of those things really, really fractured the relationship that I had with my father because he shared that stuff with me. And so it affected me in ways that I didn't even realize, or our relationship, that I should say, that I didn't even realize, because later in life, when I did come out to my mom, I came out to my mom in 99, so I was 23. But I didn't tell my father until years later. I was living in California when I told him. That was 2011. So by then I was 35. I remember reading that. Yes, I read about that in the book. Yes. And so it wasn't until I was 35 I waited a whole 12 years after I had told my mom to tell him. But I realized that I was punishing him for the way that he had mishandled me while he was married. But it showed up in other things too. Like when I first produced my stage play in Atlanta, like my mom was here, but I never shared that with him. Like he knew I had done a play, but I never really went into the details or the specifics about it.
Oh wow.
I just I cut him out of all of the moments, all of the celebratory moments, because it was my way of punishing him. Yeah. It's amazing how we function because of a trauma. I look at that as a trauma.
It is. You know, and I was thinking about that too with my stepdaughter, and because I know that, like, before my husband and I were together and before we moved in, like when she was younger, she would come over to visit him, and she would sleep in his room, and like her things were there, but she was so much littler. Yeah. And then he sort of moved her into another room. But that was like timed with my coming along, and so. But it was really about her growing as a bigger girl. Also, and he being her dad,
and just appropriateness, right? Yeah.
Right. And so what I did was, when I came into the home, and then especially when we moved in officially, and my daughter's furniture came over there, I redid an entire bedroom for her. For her. It has her name on the wall. Yes. Everything's there, and then I even saved. I let her pick her paint color, and I even saved a wall for her to paint. Yeah. So when she came in, it said Joy's Wall on there. Yeah. And she painted it and helped decorate her room, and so because I never wanted her to feel like this is no longer her home too. Right. And so when she, the first time she came and saw her room, she loved it. And she was bringing all the little girls from the neighborhood into the house to see the room. And they were hanging out in there and stuff. And then, and so I told her, I said, I want you to know, we don't get to see you as much as we would like to. We don't want you to always be here. Right. Because she needed to hear that from me. Yeah. And so.
And she needed to know that she had a space there still. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because here are two other women coming in now, and they're living here full time. Right. And I shouldn't feel like a guest. And as a child may not have the words to say that or the capacity to say that. So there needs to be an adult that's going to advocate for them, to speak up for them. Yeah.
And so it was funny because Sean said, I'm starting to wonder, because we weren't always there. Like when we introduced the girls, we spent a weekend together, and then she started asking for us to be there when she was there. And so she would get in the car and say, "Hi, Dad, is anybody at the house?"
So he feeling like,
she was looking for Dad, for the dog, or for my daughter or something. And so he's like, you're not coming to see me anymore? Right. But she loves the whole environment now. Yeah. And so for her, it's not even right if everybody's not there.
Well, that's a good thing. So it sounds like you guys have integrated really nicely.
Yeah, and it's been rough because her mom is not agreeable, but it's just what it is, and all we can do is love her through that. We don't spend any time focusing on negative aspects. We just spend all the time we can loving her in such a way that when she gets older would make her question anything else that was said.
So what do you think, from your perspective, her mom's issue is?
Truthfully,
this is so much to say. Oh, you said she's just crazy.
She's just crazy.
Is she younger?
She's got some, just by a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's got some real issues. Is
she single?
Yes.
Okay. Does she have other children?
She's got an older son that her mother raises.
Okay, so Sean's daughter is the only child that he has with her. The son is not his.
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean that says enough. She's single, and and he's moved on with somebody else, and I'm sure she sees how much this little girl enjoys spending time with you all. So she's probably feeling left out.
She had to sneak. It was funny because she had to sneak Christmas gifts for us.
Really?
Into the car with him, and he picked her up one day, and when she ran to the car, her mother called her back and said,
"What was that you just took out?"
Right. What is that? What's in that bag? And she said, "Oh, it's my Christmas gift for Daddy." And so she said, oh, okay. And so she went and got back in the car. But when she came in with the bag, there was a little gift that said mom, there was a little gift that said sister, and there was a little gift that said daddy. This was stuff she had made at school, you know.
So she calls you mom?
No, she calls me Miss Leah.
Okay, but she had mom on the Christmas gift.
She did.
That's nice. And your daughter calls him Sean?
Mr. Sean.
Mr. Sean, okay.
We kind of left it to them.
Yeah. And it should be that way.
Whatever, first name, whatever, you know, and I've always made it clear, not to her, but to him, you know, I'm not trying to replace her mom. You know, her mom's not perfect either, but it's her mom, you know, and so that's always going to be her mom. And no matter how imperfect her mom is, she's going to love her mother, as she should. And so I kind of told him, I said, I see my role as like camp counselor. You know, I'm a friend with a little bit of authority.
Right.
That's just kind of how it is. And so I still take on the role of, you know, like mothers do in the household. I remind everybody to make their beds and brush their teeth. Right. But it's sort of a blanket reminder of things. And so that's just what it is. And I try to make sure I make her feel comfortable. There's always, you know, something that she likes in the refrigerator when she's there and all of these things. So I put a lot of thought into making sure she doesn't feel like she's a guest in her own home. And so, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it. And again, for those of you that are listening for the very first time, this has been So Much to Say. We're available for free in Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube. And be sure to share this with your friends, your family, your social network, and visit www.CraigTheWriterStewart for all of your So Much to Say merchandise, to purchase your books, whatever it is that you need to do, your ringtones. Hey, girl, hey.
Yes.
Be safe. Keep loving yourself.
Baltimore, Maryland. Guess what? The Queen's Supreme Court is headed back to your city. That's right, honey. The Dream Girls are bringing the seat to your city. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know the time we had the last time, baby. We had a good time. But we're going to have an even better time, baby, because the Dream Girls, Miss Funky Donita Ross, Miss Sophia, and the real T.S. Nasby is on our way to tear Baltimore, Maryland up. Now listen, Sunday, June 30th, we're going to be having brunch with me and King David. And July 1st, baby, the seat going to be on fire. So I'm telling you to go to www.eventbrite.com to get your tickets. Get your tickets now. And listen, don't beat me there. Beat me there. Come on, Baltimore. I love you.